Part 59. She Always Loves to Sleep. Author, Guy and Faye. Chapter 597. Chapter 582 Wake Up. When Chi Saijin opened his eyes again, his eyes were covered with cloth and plunged into darkness, unable to see anything. The base of his ears moved slightly, and there were only a few shallow breathing sounds around him, so he could tell that he was unconscious. His hands were tied tightly behind his back, and the feeling of powerlessness in his body had not completely subsided. He could only temporarily maintain the previous posture, and his brain was running rapidly, trying to recall what happened before he lost consciousness. The other party injected them with something similar to an anesthetic, and the dose was very large. If the superpower hadn't had a rejection reaction to this kind of drug, which could shorten the duration of the drug's effect, I'm afraid he would have woken up even later. So, the dose injected into them was intended to keep them unconscious for a longer period of time. Chi Saijin's eyes moved slightly, he gritted his teeth, took a deep breath, secretly strengthened himself, clenched his hands tightly, and the veins on his wrists were exposed, and the handcuffs that bound him instantly broke. He stood up quickly, moving very lightly, always alert to the enemy, and at the same time, he immediately understood the surrounding environment. The other party took the two old men away and threw the four of them directly here. Except for him who had just woken up, the other three were still in a coma and fell around him. In the darkness, Chi Saijin frowned fiercely. He could barely identify He Yao's position by the sound of her breathing, and slowly approached her, trying to wake her up. Lao San, Lao San. After shouting twice, there was still no response from the other party. Chi Saijin frowned deeper and gathered his energy in the palm of his hand, wanting to help her get rid of the drug. But who knew the next second, he heard a sudden sound coming from the darkness. Croon. Chi Saijin looked happy and immediately unlocked her handcuffs, helped her up, and asked, "Are you okay?" He Yao's brain was still in chaos and she couldn't distinguish the situation. She only felt that her whole body was extremely sore, as if she had been thrown to the ground from a high altitude and fell several times, especially her wrists and the back of her neck, which didn't look like that at all. My own. She reached out and rubbed the back of her neck, took a breath of air, and cursed loudly, "What the hell, ugh! That turtle grandson dares to tie up my mother." However, before the second half of the sentence could be uttered, a big hand covered his mouth. She stared at Chi Saijin, who put his index finger to his lips, as if he hated iron, slapped her on the forehead, and scolded her in a low voice, "Keep your voice down. I'm afraid you won't attract anyone. Human. When will this girl's blustering character change?" He Yao's expression paused, her eyes flashed lightly, she turned around to scan the surrounding situation, and after realizing her current situation, she became as quiet as a chicken for an instant while blinking at Chi Saijin desperately. "I know, fourth brother. Let me go. It's going to suffocate everyone." Her face was full of tears. Chi Saijin glared at her fiercely and let go of her hand. He Yao took a deep breath, but because she was afraid of making any noise, she moved very lightly, which looked very funny. But now is not the time for jokes. Chi Saijin took advantage of her to calm down, looked around again, and whispered, "The two old men have been taken away. We should be temporarily locked up in this place." He Yao was startled, and her expression became more serious. She followed his line of sight and noticed the other two people lying on the ground, and asked, "Do you want to wake them up?" "No need," Chi Saijin said, "walking them up will only increase the panic, so just let them faint." He stood up and tried to walk a few steps in the dark. He didn't encounter any obstacles. The surrounding area was relatively empty and there were no windows, but he could feel the slight flow of air around him. There should be ventilation openings. He Yao also stood up, walked to Chi Mao Yi and Lim Wei and checked them carefully. After finding that they were unconscious and not injured, She secretly breathed a sigh of relief, left them there and ignored them, and turned around. "Find Chi Saijin." "How is it?" she asked, "can I go out?" Chi Saijin closed his eyes, slowly released his mental power and spread it around, saying, "I'll give it a try." End of this chapter. She always loves to sleep. Author, Guy and Fei. Chapter 598. Chapter 583. In the quiet and dark environment, Chi Saijin slowly closed his eyes, and his mental power spread rapidly around him like a dense network. While he was investigating, He Yao suddenly realized something. She raised her wrist suddenly and swiped her finger out of the air. The exquisite bracelet with supernatural powers appeared instantly. She quickly activated the bracelet to try to send information to the outside world, but to her surprise, the bracelet didn't respond at all. He Yao frowned and patted her hard several times, but there was still no response. She cursed lowly and kicked the wall hard to vent her anger. Stop at the critical moment. It has been a long time since they were captured here. You don't have to think about it to know how chaotic it will be outside. If nothing else, Li Ju and the association must be looking for them. But just at this moment, the bracelet malfunctioned and could not contact other people. Suddenly, Chi Saijin opened his eyes and said in a deep voice, "There is someone." He Yao's expression changed. "Fourth brother, what should I do? Do you want to take the opportunity to escape?" Chi Saijin shook his head. "No, Grandpa was taken away by them and his whereabouts are unknown, so we can't act rashly." He frowned and thought for a moment, then turned his gaze to the two people who were still unconscious on the ground. An idea flashed in his mind: let's use the plan to see what they want to do. After saying that, he took He Yao back to the place where they fainted just now and lay back down again, pretending to have never woken up. They had just finished camouflaging when they heard a clang, similar to the sound of an old rusty iron door scraping against the ground, and then a dazzling light came in, illuminating the originally dark space. Several footsteps followed, and someone suddenly choked and asked in a disgusted tone, "Brother, sir, didn't you already take those two old men away? Why do you still need these little brats?" Ah! The footsteps became clearer and clearer, and the people were getting closer and closer to them. The man called the boss replied, "The old man refuses to tell me what he wants, so of course I have to use these small knocks to beat him." Oh, I understand." During the gap between their words, no one noticed the subtle brow movements of Chi Saijin, who was lying on the ground. According to their words, "Do you want to take them to see Grandpa?" Just right, it takes no effort at all to get it. The boss came to them, took a look at the tied man lying on the ground, threw the cigarette in his mouth to the ground, rubbed it back and forth with his toes, blew out a smoke ring, and pointed at Chi Si. Jin and others said, "Take them away to me." Yes. His younger brother got the order, stepped forward to pick up the four of them, and followed the boss away. He Yao felt like she was being carried on someone's shoulders and was jolted all the way. The jolt made her almost vomit out her bile and she almost couldn't hold on. Fortunately, just when she was about to jump up and strangle this bastard, they were thrown away again. Got into the car. The moment the car door was closed, He Yao and Chi Saijin opened their eyes at the same time and looked at each other in tacit understanding. He Yao, "Fourth brother, they." Chi Saijin, "I've tried it, ordinary people." He Yao said, "Oh, it seemed like they were just small shrimps. Even if they were caught, they would not be able to get any useful information." Seeing what she was thinking, Chi Saijin said, "Keep pretending, they will take us to Grandpa's place." "But," He Yao pointed to the two people beside him hesitantly, "we have nothing to do with each other, but what about Sister Wai Wei and Er Shaoli? It is too dangerous for the two ordinary people to use the scheme to their advantage. They cannot and will not let them get involved in this matter." Chi Saijin hesitated for a moment and looked at Chi Mao Yi and Lim Wei with complicated expressions. This was indeed a problem. End of this chapter. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. She always loves to sleep. Author, Guy and Faye. Chapter 599. Chapter 584 Continent. The people driving in front were still chatting and didn't notice anything unusual behind them. Their ears were filled with mixed conversations and the roar of the car engine. The dark light in the car obscured half of Chi Saijan's face. The curled eyelashes hid the expression in her eyes, and her mind was racing with thoughts, analyzing the current situation. If you easily get rid of them and then escape with Chi Mao Yi and the others, there is a high chance that they will be alerted. The enemy's situation is not clear, and even if they escape, just he and He Yao may not have a chance of winning. But if they did not escape, they would be taken to the people behind the scenes, and He Yao would still be unable to protect these two people. Chi Saijan narrowed his eyes slightly, feeling in a dilemma. While he was pondering the countermeasures with an expressionless face, there was a very light rubbing sound of clothing, and he suddenly felt the unconscious person beside him move slightly. Chi Saijan's pupils narrowed slightly and he lowered his gaze in astonishment. The space in the back seat is very small. The four of them are squeezed together, and any slight change in any one of them can be clearly detected. Lying next to Chi Saijan is Chi Mao Yi. Chi Saijan. Chi Mao Yi's long eyelashes trembled slightly, and she slowly opened her eyes, staring blankly at the roof of the car. Before she could react, she subconsciously blurted out, "This is, Before she could ask her doubts, a generous hand covered her mouth. Chi Mao Yi's eyes were immediately filled with panic, and the next moment she kept struggling, trying to scream in panic, but her voice was stuck in her throat for some reason, and she couldn't make any sound. She was so scared that her whole body was shaking. The last scene before she fell into coma also appeared in her mind. She suddenly realized that she had been kidnapped, so her resistance became stronger and stronger. However, the drug in her body had just expired, and her whole body she couldn't use any strength at all, so she was quickly subdued by the person behind her covering her. Just when she was about to despair, the hand suddenly relaxed a little, giving her some room to breathe. Chi Mao Yi was stunned for a moment, and the next moment she felt a warm body approaching behind her, pressing tightly against her back. Her whole body suddenly stiffened, and she did not dare to move rashly. The other person slowly lowered his head and stopped next to her ear. His breath sprayed on the back of her neck, making her shiver. Just when Chi Mao Yi's scalp was numb and she wanted to resist again, she heard a familiar and deep voice, "Wai Wei, don't be afraid, it's me." Chi Mao Yi's eyes trembled, and her whole body immediately relaxed, and she let out two moans. "Chi Saijan, be good, keep your voice down, we are in danger now." She nodded, indicating that she understood. Behind her, Chi Saijan's eyes fell on the top of her hair, his eyes softened for a moment, and he let go of his hand. Chi Mao Yi took 2 breaths, suppressing the joy and excitement in her heart. She wanted to turn around to see if he was okay, but was stopped. "Don't move, you will be discovered." She immediately stopped moving and held her breath. The voices of the people in front of her came clearly to her ears, and her expression immediately became a little panicked. "Those people are still there." "Ah, Ajahn." She did not dare to speak too loudly, and kept her voice trembling. What is our situation now? And, where is Grandpa?" The space for free movement was too small, and the light in the carriage was dim. She knew nothing except Chi Saijan, who was close behind her. Hearing her mention Mr. Chi Saijan paused and was silent for a moment. He put his hand on the top of her hair, rubbed it gently, and said comfortingly, "It's okay, don't worry." Having said that, everyone knew something was wrong with the situation at hand, not to mention that his comfort was not convincing at all. Chi Mao Yi's body trembled even more violently, and she bit her lower lip tightly, trying not to make any sound. Seeing this, Chi Sijin sighed softly, put his arms around her, and hugged her tightly. Chi Mao Yi curled up in her arms desperately, as if this way she would feel safe. At the same time, Lim Wei also woke up and was also covered by He Yao. After figuring out the situation, the two people who had just woken up maintained their previous postures without making any major movements, for fear of disturbing the people who were driving. "Fourth brother, what should we do now?" He Yao asked Chi Sijin in a low voice. Now that both of them were awake, what he said before would definitely not work. Because they would not see these two men in danger. Chi Sijin hissed, signaling for her to be silent. He Yao raised her eyebrows slightly, as if she understood what he was going to do next, and an unexpected smile appeared on the corners of her lips. Although the other two people didn't know why, they subconsciously held their breath. Chi Mao Yi felt the person behind her move slightly, and then there was nothing behind her, and Chi Sijin sat up. She was about to turn around, but her eyes were covered by that familiar big hand. Chi Sijin's deep voice sounded in her ears, "Be good, don't look." Chi Mao Yi stayed still. Chi Sijin smiled briefly, and his face was covered with coldness. He quietly walked around behind the people who were driving, his eyes were cold, his hands were raised in the air, and two daggers suddenly appeared out of thin air in his palms. The next second, the hand raised the knife and dropped it, with a puff sound, the blade was like the body, and several people lost their breath in an instant. The driver almost slipped on the steering wheel. Chi Sijin quickly held him down and shouted in a deep voice, "Third brother." He Yao responded, quickly stepped forward to steady the steering wheel, and then kicked the body aside. The driver just changed. The perfect cooperation between the two shocked Chi Mao Yi and Lim Wei. However, it was not this that shocked them the most. The moment she saw the corpse, Chi Mao Yi immediately screamed and covered her mouth with her hands. Her whole body was shaking. An extremely disgusting fear surged from the bottom of her heart. She looked at Chi Sijin in horror. Ajin, me. Did you kill someone?" The eldest lady, who had never seen such a scene before, was so frightened that she lost her speech. Chi Sijin sighed bitterly and lowered his eyes. He knew it would be like this. He put the dagger back into his bracelet and planned to step forward to coax Chi Mao Yi. Unexpectedly, the next moment, the latter fell into his arms. Chi Sijin subconsciously caught it and his expression paused for a moment. "Why Wei? No. Murdering is against the law. Ajin, you will get into trouble." Chi Sijin's mouth twitched. "So, is this the point? But forget it, we can't just argue with her right now." While patting her back, he said softly, "I'll be fine, don't worry." Compared with Chi Mao Yi, he was more worried about Chi Sijin, but Lim Wei was shocked by his crisp and clean way of killing someone, which was obviously not his first time. His jaw almost hit the ground, and he opened his mouth stumblingly. I'm talking about you, what are you?" After holding it in for a long time, he couldn't find a suitable word to describe it. In the end, he could only come up with one: a crime. Although these scumbags indeed deserve to die, they are also committing a crime by doing this. He Yao, who was driving ahead, glanced at their situation in the rearview mirror and said calmly, "Don't worry, this is not within the empire, and the law can no longer punish murderers." Lim Wei and Chi Mao Yi were stunned at the same time and glanced at each other. Apparently they were so shocked by her shocking words that they didn't know what to say. Then, "Where is this place?" He Yao turned the steering wheel and put her arms casually on the window. Her eyes casually scanned the moving scene outside the window. She snorted lightly and said in a sarcastic tone, "Here." "Who?" "Here, killing becomes the tacit rule. A person who kills without blinking an eye, hell." End of this chapter. She always loves to sleep. Author, Guy and Fei. Chapter 600. Chapter 585. What a joke. Lao San, look for any safe place nearby, Chi Sijin said in a deep voice. He Yao's eyes narrowed and she glanced out the window. They were on a mountain-ringing road. Looking around, they were covered in deep forests and could not see the bottom. There seemed to be a faint red light flickering in the forest, which was very similar to a monitor. She narrowed her eyes, clicked her tongue twice, and replied, as of now, no. Besides, we may have entered the other party's monitoring range. He Yao sighed and said with emotion, it's not good. Grass. Chi Sijin couldn't help but curse, but because Chi Mao Yi was present, he temporarily held back his anger. He quietly glanced at her little face, which was bloodless and pale due to panic, and sighed in his heart, find a secluded place to park the car. He Yao raised her eyebrows and glanced at him without knowing why, but she didn't say anything. She obeyed his words and followed his words. She stepped on the accelerator and the car suddenly accelerated, like a speeding meteor flying across the road, streaking across a silver streak. Trace. Chi Sijin, what are you? Lim Wei couldn't help but ask, looking at him with doubtful eyes. At the same time, he glanced at He Yao who was driving in front of him, feeling faintly shocked and confused in his heart. Strange, so strange. When the same thing happened, Chi Sijin and He Yao's reactions were shockingly calm, and the names they called each other were also. What on earth is it? Chi Sijin raised his eyes and looked at him and said, don't ask, we'll talk about it after we escape. His tone was solemn that he had never seen before, and his cold and indifferent expression was also particularly unfamiliar, giving people a sense of pressure for no reason. Lim Wei was stunned on the spot. For a moment, he seemed to see the gloomy look in Chi Sijin's eyes, and even he couldn't help but tremble in his heart. Ajin. Chi Mao Yi was also shocked by his cold and emotionless expression. She looked at him in disbelief, almost unable to believe that this was the Chi Sijin she knew. Chi Sijin's expression moved slightly, and he tugged at the corner of his lips. A trace of warmth appeared on his face again. He raised his hand and put it on the top of her hair. His voice was reassuring, Wai Wei, I will explain these things to you later. Chi Mao Yi nodded blankly, but lowered his eyes at a loss. For some reason, his words made her feel inexplicably flustered. She always felt that something was going to happen, and once it happened, some things would never go back to the way they were before. The car continued to drive at high speed. In the middle of the journey, He Yao took advantage of the gap in driving to open the passenger door and kicked out the bodies of the people. Bye. She breathed a long sigh of relief and sighed, it's finally spacious. Each of these people was as heavy as a pig, and they were so crowded in front that she was almost suffocated. Just when she wanted to move the window to take a breath, she suddenly caught a glimpse of a few black dots in the rearview mirror from the corner of her eye. He Yao's eyes narrowed and she said in a deep voice, fourth brother, you have a tail. Chi Sijin moved his eyes, I saw it. He Yao, what should I do? Chi Sijin, get rid of it. He Yao's eyes became fierce, and she stepped on the accelerator to the bottom. The car suddenly accelerated, the tires and the ground made a harsh friction sound, and everyone couldn't help but lean back. However, the cars behind them were still chasing after them, and they changed from one car to a row, approaching them directly. It was clearly reflected in the rearview mirror that someone in the car behind slowly raised a gun and aimed at them. Chi Sijin's pupils shrank, and he reflexively held Chi Mao Yi in his arms, shouting, get down. As soon as he finished speaking, the dense bullets hit the car body and the glass like big raindrops, making a crackling sound. Beneath him, Chi Mao Yi was shaking violently, her eyes were red and filled with tears, but she bit her index finger and tried not to make a sound. The pampered eldest lady has never seen such a battle before, and she has not cried until now. She is really strong enough. But she knew very well that her strength was entirely based on Chi Saijin being by her side. Without him, she might have collapsed long ago. Oh shit. Under the intensive attack, He Yao hammered the steering wheel angrily and shouted, "Fourth brother! Help me!" Chi Saijin raised his head slightly and pressed down both Chi Mao Yi and Lim Wei completely. He slightly arched his body and moved to the side of the car door. He took out a gun from his bracelet, stretched out the muzzle, aimed at the rear, and squinted his eyes. Pull the trigger. Boom dash. The car behind it shook violently and exploded. The sky-high firelight filled half of the sky, like a gorgeous fireworks show, and magnificent. Chi Saijin put back his gun expressionlessly, leaned against the car door, and said to He Yao in front of him, "Drive the car steadily." He Yao gritted her teeth, "I'll try my best." Chi Saijin silently counted for a few seconds, then opened the car door suddenly, leaned out with his whole body, reached for the door frame, and let himself hang out of the car. He raised the gun with his other hand, and pointed the dark muzzle at the vehicle behind again. He narrowed his eyes and was about to take aim when the car suddenly staggered, leaving a crooked mark on the road, dodging the hail of bullets coming from behind. Chi Saijin was almost thrown away, but managed to steady himself, turned around and shouted at He Yao, "Can you do it? TMD, if you have the skills, come here." "I don't have a driver's license, and I haven't learned to drive," He Yao shouted with a broken expression. "Chi Saijin. Chi Mao Yi. Lim Wei." Amid the chaos, the car was eerily quiet for a moment. I don't know how long it took, but Lim Wei suddenly said quietly, "How about, I'll drive it?" Although he was also frightened, it was better than letting a minor drive in this situation. After all, the lives of a whole car of people are at stake. He Yao and Chi Saijin rejected it in unison, "No." Lim Wei, "But she." Chi Saijin tried to aim again and said nonchalantly, "It's okay, I'm used to it." Lim Wei, "Please, can you please stop saying such creepy things in such a calm tone? What does it mean to get used to it? Is this kind of speed of life and death something you can get used to?" Lim Wei was instantly frightened. However, Chi Saijin ignored him and simply fired several shots at the vehicles behind him, blowing up their fuel tanks with great accuracy. Explosions immediately followed one after another, resounding throughout the mountain forest. Chi Saijin took back his body and said, "Okay, it's all settled." The two people who were lying on their backs straightened up carefully. Lim Wei looked back. After seeing the tragic situation of the other party, he couldn't help but take a breath and glanced at Chi Saijin with a complicated expression. His methods are straightforward and neat, without any sloppiness. He is as ruthless and decisive as his third uncle. In the past, I really underestimated him. No, not just him, everyone was deceived by him. The second young master of the Chi family is an ignorant and unskilled young man? What a joke. End of this chapter. She always loves to sleep. Author, Guy and Fei. Chapter 601. Chapter 586. A team of fighters. At this time, the association is the base of the second team. Diddy diddy. A rapid warning sound suddenly sounded, the scarlet light on the instrument kept flashing, the index changed rapidly, and rows of complex and confusing codes quickly passed by. The fair-skinned man sitting in the center of a row of monitors instantly focused his eyes, his expression became serious, and he quickly moved over the keyboard, staring at the data displayed on the screen without blinking. "What's wrong?" The assistant next to him heard the news and came forward to check. The man's hand movements did not stop at all, and he replied, "The bracelets of Team Leader He and Team Leader Chi have signals." "What?" The assistant's eyes widened in astonishment, and he immediately froze on the spot. The fair-skinned man took the time to locate the specific location of the bracelet, trying to find them before the signal disappeared. From the corner of his eye, he saw the assistant still staying where he was, and said in a deep voice, What are you doing standing still? Go and notify the boss. Oh, okay. The assistant stumbled out and ran straight to Li Ju. However, when he arrived, he discovered that Li Ju was not there. Only Bai Muo was there. She was lying on Li Ju's recliner and reading a magazine. When he saw this, he put down the book in his hand and raised his eyebrows and asked, "What's the matter?" The assistant was stunned for a moment and asked, "Team leader Bai, where is the boss?" "Bai Muo, I was called by the president." He became anxious instantly. "The positions of the two team leaders have been located, what should we do now?" Bai Muo stood up instantly, pulling him out with a hurried expression, "Take me to have a look." At this time, Li Ju was sitting in the president's office, with freshly brewed and steaming coffee in front of her. Opposite her, Zhong Qing was sitting there leisurely sipping coffee, and the two of them said nothing. Li Ju glanced at him lightly, then turned to look at Mia, who was standing aside and wanted to hide far away, and raised her eyebrows slightly at her. The meaning in her eyes was very clear. "Explain." "Mia." She twitched the corner of her mouth, cleared her throat, and broke the silence. "Sir." Zhong Qing put the cup down, making a crisp sound that was neither light nor heavy. She immediately closed her mouth and was as quiet as a chicken. Li Ju narrowed her eyes and said in an unclear tone, "Teacher, did you ask me to come here just to perform a pantomime?" "Of course not." Zhong Qing raised his eyes and looked at her. A hint of complexity suddenly flashed deep in his eyes, and he said, "Ajiu, what do you think about your grandfather being kidnapped?" Before he could finish speaking, Li Ju interrupted, "I will solve it myself." "This is not something you can solve alone." "Li Ju, I still have a second team." Zhong Qing looked at her and sighed deeply, "Ziaju, I am your teacher. If you encounter anything, you can come to me." Whenever she encounters this kind of thing, her first reaction is always to solve it by herself. She never considers asking other people for help. No matter how much pressure she puts on, she will deal with it alone. She is extremely stubborn and will never complain to the people around her. Li Ju's expression remained calm. "No need, I can't help you in your current situation." As she said that, she looked at Zhong Qing with her eyes vaguely, and finally stopped at his green and white face, which was so tender that it could stand on the spot. The meaning was obvious. "Zhong Qing," he exploded at that time. "Li Ju, why are you talking to your teacher?" Li Ju snorted coldly, "Old man, you should take care of yourself first. Others see me standing with you, and those who don't know think we are siblings traveling." She paused, and her eyes became particularly disgusted. "Is there no limit to your ability to rejuvenate? See you later." "Isn't communication a problem?" "Zhong Qing." Zhong Qing finally suppressed all the swear words and said to her calmly, "I can't see anyone like this, but that doesn't mean I can't find someone to help you." Li Ju raised his eyebrows. "Who are you looking for?" "Zhong Qing, a team Li Ju." "Mia." "President, you really are not worried that this may cause more trouble?" Li Ju felt like she had heard a big joke. "Old man, are you sure you are helping me or not harming me? If a team of people really come to help, I'm afraid Mr. Li will never come back in this life. How can a dead girl talk?" Zhong Qing glanced at her faintly and snorted coldly in his heart. "If you knew that your man was a team of Q gods, I don't see how you could say such a thing." Li Ju rolled his eyes and looked like he refused to communicate. "Sorry, I have a natural conflict with the first team, so I won't bother them." After saying that, she stood up and wanted to leave, but was immediately stopped by Zhong Qing. "Stop." His face suddenly showed an expression of hatred for steel. "I asked you, can you two of you help me save some worries? In the association, these two are fighting to the death, but in the imperial capital, they are like glue. They are not as two-faced as you." Zhong Qing took a deep breath. resisting the urge in his heart to pierce the window between them with one sentence, and forced a smile out of the corner of his mouth. Xiaju, don't worry, God Q is also your master by seniority. Uncle, it's okay to have small fights between the first team and the second team, but he will never be ambiguous about major matters. Li Jupai pulled his lips with a smile. Sorry, I can't believe it. Just by getting in front of that guy and causing her trouble again and again, she never wanted to see him again in her life. Why can't this girl listen? Zhongqing pinched his eyebrows with a headache and wanted to continue to persuade her. Unexpectedly, just as he was about to speak, he heard a sudden explosion outside. At that moment, he seemed to feel the ground shaking. The three of them looked out the window at the same time. Fire spread across the horizon in the distance, accompanied by explosions one after another, and billowing black smoke covered the sky. That's the direction of the second team's base. Li Ju's eyes darkened, and the next second, the communicator on her body was buzzing as if it was going to explode. Boss! The person over there shouted something urgently, and the next moment he choked several times before continuing. Many unknown fighter planes suddenly appeared near the base. Li Ju frowned fiercely. Who is so brave to openly challenge the association? Her doubts were still lingering in her mind, when she heard the person on the other side of the communicator shout again, wait a minute. There seemed to be markings on those fighter planes' dash. The man zoomed in on the tail of a fighter plane on the monitor. The next moment, he opened his eyes wide in shock and exclaimed in a broken voice, it's a team. A team of fighter planes. Li Ju. Zhongqing and Mia heard the sentence clearly because of their loud voices. Zhongqing raised his eyes and met Li Ju's ghostly expression. The corners of his mouth twitched twice, and he turned back to look at Mia. The same thought was clearly felt in her eyes. Damn it, Qi Jinkai, you are finished. You are absolutely doomed. Do you really know whose base you bombed? In the silence, Li Ju asked quietly, old man, is this the one you are talking about, my good uncle? You said to help me 1 second, but the next second you came to blow up my base? Zhongqing. At this moment, the president has only one thought in his mind. Qi, Jing, Ci. Are you going to die or not? End of this chapter. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. She always loves to sleep. Author, Guy and Fei. Chapter 602. Chapter 587 Losing Horses Collectively, 1. There were many times when he was slapped in the face, but none of them came faster than this time. Zhongqing looked at the several fighter planes circling in the sky. The red light was flashing, as bright as stars, and he suddenly felt half of his face burning with pain. At this time, in the sky above the second team's base, majestic fighter planes were hovering in the sky. Looking down from above, you could only see the messy ruins after the bombing and the black smoke that had not yet dissipated. Lu Qingran took a quick glance, put her hand on the joystick, turned her head and asked, "Third brother, do you want to continue?" Qi Jinkai squinted his eyes and stared at the situation below, and muttered, "Wait a minute. They don't really want to fight the second team this time, it's just a demonstration, and the offensive doesn't need to be so urgent." Lu Qingran hummed and pressed the communicator to notify the pilots of other fighter planes, "Everyone, stay where you are." In the base, Baimwiu was tracking the location of Qi Sijin and the two of them, but was staggered by the sudden huge vibration and almost lost his balance. He reflexively held onto the nearest table corner to stabilize himself. Body shape. Her face was suddenly full of questions. What's going on? Is there an earthquake? The next moment, someone shouted on the public channel of the communicator, "No. A team is invading. Everyone prepare to defend. Baimwiu. Baimwiu. 1. A team. Before she could react, she heard Ningfeng replying in the channel, "Defense is nothing. If you hit me at the door, you will be if you hold back. Everyone, please listen to me. Fight back immediately. Bimwew, wait." However, it was too late. Ningfeng turned off the communicator. Grass. Bimwew cursed and rushed out immediately, for fear of making things worse. When she arrived at the main entrance of the base, the open space and the gate in front of her had been razed to the ground, leaving only a deep pit with black smoke that had not yet dissipated lingering around the pit. Bimwew was caught off guard and choked a few times due to the thick smoke. She covered her nose, grabbed the panicked team member who happened to be passing by her, and asked, "Where's Ah Feng?" Faced with the sudden attack, the man panicked. He was stunned for 2 seconds and replied, "Team Leader Ning, flew a fighter plane to meet the enemy." Bimwew twitched the corner of his mouth, immediately let go of his hand, and raised his eyes to the sky. At this time, the hovering fighter planes were clearly divided into 2 groups. Based on the markings on the fuselage, one could barely identify the enemy and the enemy. Lu Qingran looked at the dozen or so second team fighters dispatched in front of him with contemptuous and sarcastic eyes. He pressed the loudspeaker and said unceremoniously, "Is your team going to start a war with us?" Among the fighters on the opposite side, Ningfeng stared at them angrily, almost crushing the control stick with the strength of his hands, and cursed angrily, "You, labor and management. You ran wild on our territory. Do you still have the nerve to start a war? Do you need me to take a look in the mirror?" Hearing these words, the faces of Lu Qingran and the other 2 people all darkened in unison. He looked back at Qi Jinkai and replied coldly, "We just have something we want to talk to your team about." "Ningfeng, what a nonsense. We bombed our base. Is this how you talk about things?" His eyes were cold, with uncontrollable anger gathering in his eyes, and he said to everyone, "Since the first team is provoking us, we don't have to endure it anymore, just do it for me, damn it, I really don't think I'll teach them a lesson." Is the second team easy to bully? Normally it would be frustrating to just maintain a face-saving relationship with them, but now they are attacking you right at your doorstep. If you don't fight back, you are not a human being. "Yes," everyone shouted in unison. "That's a fart." Suddenly, Bimwew's furious voice sounded from the communication devices of each fighter plane at the same time, "Ningfeng. And you. Get down immediately, immediately. No one is allowed to take action without permission." Bimwew stood on the ground, looking at the eye-catching logo on a group of fighter planes in the sky, feeling extremely up in his heart. It was really a flood that washed away the Dragon King Temple. "What is all this?" Ningfeng said angrily, "No. The whole team has been provoked to this level, is it possible that they still endure it? If this spreads out from now on, where will the reputation of the 2 teams go? This is all a misunderstanding, anyway, get down here first." Bimwew pinched his brows with a headache, and advised earnestly, "Come down first, I promise, we won't swallow this bad breath in vain." Everyone looked at each other in shock. "Team Leader Ning, this. What should they do?" Ningfeng looked angrily at the menacing fighters on the opposite side, gritted his teeth and said, "Get off first." After a while, all the fighter planes that were clamoring for counterattack were evacuated. Lu Qingran was a little confused by this operation. "Third brother, what's going on?" Qi Jinkai squinted and looked down. The hot fire had been extinguished, and the thick smoke had lingered on the ruins for a long time, making it difficult to see the figures. After a moment of silence, his deep magnetic voice sounded, "Land." Lu Qingran received the order and immediately ordered other fighters to follow and land. At the gate of the base, almost all the people from the second team gathered there aggressively. Just looking at the formation, they looked like they were about to start a fight. Ningfeng stood in the first and most conspicuous position, staring at them slowly, his eyes were so fierce that he seemed to want to eat people. The other members of a team landed first. Faced with their murderous aura, they lined up to confront them for tat. Members of the two teams stood on both sides of the raised ruins, their turbulent eyes meeting in mid-air, and the atmosphere gradually became tense. Before Qi Jinkai and others could push through the crowd and come to the front, Ningfeng couldn't help but say in a strange tone, "Are you guys from the first team just coming to our base and barking randomly when you are bored?" Lu Qingran paused and looked strange for a moment. Just now in the air, the two parties were talking through a loudspeaker. The sound quality was slightly changed, and the original sound could not be heard at all. But now, why did he suddenly feel that the voice of the other party was very familiar? Is it an illusion? End of this chapter. She always loves to sleep. Author, Guy and Fei. Chapter 603. Chapter 588 Losing Horses Collectively, 2. Lu Qingran paused and was stunned for a moment. Before he could react, Qi Jinkai and Bai Yuxiu had already pushed through the crowd blocking the way and walked to the front. The next second, he raised his eyes, and his eyes met Ningfeng unexpectedly. At that moment, his mind went blank. How is it possible? Ningfeng's expression also became stagnant, and his eyes seemed to be stuck on Lu Qingran's body, unable to move. His whole person was very square, giving him the illusion that he was in a magical state. What the is going on? He looked at Lu Qingran blankly, then moved his gaze to the other two people blankly, and finally settled on Qi Jinkai's handsome face, his pupils shaking. Lu Qingran can guarantee that since he met Ningfeng, he has never seen him show such a colorful, complicated, and ferocious expression, which instantly lowered his entire appearance. At that moment, everyone present was lucky enough to witness Ningfeng's expression go through blank, stunned, twisted, weird and finally as if he had seen a ghost within 10 seconds. It's very complicated anyway. Ningfeng's mental journey was too complicated to describe, and his eyes were full of speechless words. How small the world is. Why is it that the probability of Mr. Lian Qi being the captain of a team still happened? What's even more annoying is that Lu Qingran and Bai Yuxiu are also in the same team. What kind of evil fate is this that makes the gods and ghosts cry? Ningfeng twitched the corners of his lips and said awkwardly, "Master Qi, what a coincidence." The moment Qi Jinkai saw him, he glanced at Lu Qingran casually. The latter had turned to stone in shock and remained motionless. He frowned and his eyes deepened slightly. Ningfeng will appear here, and his identity is self-evident. Judging from his posture, he should be one of the core members of the second team, so. He narrowed his eyes dangerously, and his tone was not softened by the relationship between Ningfeng and Lu Qingran. After all, in his heart, no one was as important as Li Ju's safety. Unfortunately, I came to see you specially. Ningfeng was stunned for a moment, looking at the base that had been bombed horribly around him, and finally remembered the good deeds these three people had done 10 minutes ago. The corners of his lips that were barely raised were suddenly lowered, a mean coldness appeared on his face, and his tone was stiff. "Oh? So is this the sincerity of the team?" Ningfeng pointed to the ruins and huge pit behind him. "When I come to visit, do you know how to write the word polite?" What he said was a bit too sinister. Lu Qingran finally made contact from his petrified state. When he heard this, the corners of his mouth twitched, and his tone was warm and cautious. "A Feng." Ningfeng raised his eyelids. "Who are you?" Lu Qingran immediately became as quiet as a chicken. "I personally brought people to my boyfriend's house and blew it up to pieces. He even wanted to break up with me, even if he wanted to die. He'd better shut up first." Lu Qingran honestly stopped talking. Bai Yuxiu on the side gave him a look of disdain. He snorted coldly in his heart and looked at Ningfeng with some dissatisfaction in his eyes. If he remembered correctly, this brat seemed to have had a scandal with Xiao Yu. If he hadn't suppressed the post in advance, Xiao Yu might have had another scandal. With the outburst of the girl control attribute and the conflicting stance between them, Bai Yuxiu had no intention of being polite to him. He cleared his throat and said, "I'm sorry, politeness is relative. Since your team has no bottom line, neither do we. What etiquette is necessary?" Ning Feng. No bottom line? This is true. The second team never pays attention to the bottom line when doing things. But the premise is to deal with outsiders and enemies. They have never done anything outrageous to the people in the association. This is also the reason why a team and them have disliked each other for so long, but it was just a cold war and did not escalate to a military solution. Otherwise, the base of the first team would have been completely moved by them, leaving nothing behind. So, who does he mean? Ning Feng was immediately furious and felt a big pot slamming on his and the second team's heads. End of this chapter. She always loves to sleep. Author, Guy Enfei. Chapter 604. Chapter 589 Losing Horses Collectively, 3. Ning Feng's expression turned cold. "Don't be so weird. We have never offended you." Bai Yuxiu mocked. "No? Don't you feel guilty when you say this?" You dash. Qi Jinkai was not in the mood to listen to them continue to argue, so he suddenly said one word at a time, "Stop talking nonsense and hand the person over." As soon as he finished speaking, Ning Feng's eyes flickered for a moment, and his eyes averted slightly. He thought the person Qi Jinkai was talking about was Hal Eileen, who they had just brought back. He subconsciously felt guilty, but unexpectedly, the subtle change in his expression was keenly captured by the other party. Qi Jinkai immediately narrowed his eyes dangerously, and his tone became even colder. "I'll say it again, call them out." Ning Feng hummed, "I'm sorry, Mr. Qi, I don't understand what you are talking about." "Are you sure you want to continue pretending to be stupid?" Bai Yuxiu stepped forward, with a hint of anger on his face. "Are the people in the second team just daring to do this?" This sentence accurately stepped on Ning Feng's minefield. Originally, he was still a little guilty about Hal Eileen's matter, but now that he was so provoked by Bai Yuxiu, that little bit of emotion immediately disappeared, and he instantly felt confident and straightened his back. It is because they are not capable enough to detect people. Hal Eileen cannot find anything valuable if she continues to stay in the Special Administration Bureau. It is better to hand her over to their second team to get more useful clues from her. Although it is indeed wrong to steal people, it is not more outrageous than these people flying fighter planes to blow up their base to pieces. This is challenging their bottom line. Ning Feng said in a sarcastic tone, "I'm sorry, we won't deny what we have done. As for the others dash." He paused, "We will never admit it." As soon as the last word fell, the air solidified instantly, the surrounding temperature dropped to the extreme, and the tense atmosphere seemed to be about to start a fight in the next second. In fact, this is exactly the case. Qi Jinkai sneered. The aura emanating from his body made people subconsciously fearful and oppressive. He said, "If you don't drink a toast, you will be punished with a drink." Ning Feng was not to be outdone and smiled evilly. "Do you think labor and management are afraid of you? Don't think that just because he is the boss's boyfriend, he can run so unscrupulously to the gate of their second team's base and make wild remarks here. It is tantamount to crushing all their faces on the ground. Which one is tolerable or intolerable?" Qi Jinkai raised his hand, and everyone in the group immediately raised their guns at the same time. At almost the same moment, the members of the second team behind Ning Feng did not dare to show weakness and picked up their weapons to aim at each other. The battle is about to break out. Lu Qinggran said and immediately stepped forward to try to stop their crazy behavior. "Wait a minute, third brother, calm down." He turned around and looked at Ning Feng with tears in his eyes. His expression was extremely miserable. Feng, we have something to say." Ning Feng said coldly, "Get out of here. The accounts between the two of them will be settled with him later." Seeing that the two sides were about to get into a fight, at this moment, a joking and slightly embarrassed voice sounded from behind, "Don't do anything. We are all a family, and we can discuss matters." Bai Yuxiu's face froze suddenly, and the next second, he raised his eyes almost in disbelief and looked at the owner of the voice. His whole body could no longer maintain the shock just now, and his expression was shocked and funny. Ningfeng paused, clicked his tongue, and turned around. The people in the second team slowly made way for a way, and a slender figure slowly came into their sight. He pushed away the people in front of her and squeezed to the front. His face was full of smiles and he looked at Qi Jingxi. Smiled and greeted the other party's surprised look. "Hi, third brother, what a coincidence." The surprise on Qi Jingkai's face was fleeting, and he instantly returned to indifference and calmness. He narrowed his eyes and said with no emotion in his tone, "Bai, Mu, you." Bai Mu's expression froze, and the smile at the corner of his mouth faded. Oops, this was the first time since she met Qi Jingkai that he called her by her full name. You don't have to guess how angry he is now. Bai Yuxiu almost bit his tongue, stared blankly at Bai Mu, and stammered, "Xiao, Xiao, Xiao you? You." He looked at her, then looked past her to the second group of people behind her, and he suddenly realized something. Looking at this situation, her identity is self-evident. "You, are you from the second team?" Bai Mu laughed dryly, "Yes." Bai Yuxiu's expression became more complicated. He remembered her disappearance with Hal Irene in the Special Administration Bureau. He took a deep breath and asked, "Is that the Hal Irene you took away?" The atmosphere became extremely awkward for a moment. Bai Yuxiu could no longer describe the complexity in his heart. On the way here, he was still worried about whether she would be in danger. Who knew he would blow up his sister's base? The mixed feelings were beyond words. Bai Yuxiu looked at her with a faint look, curled his lips, and finally suppressed a sentence, "Are you injured?" Just now, they seemed to be making a lot of noise. No. Oh. It's even more embarrassing. The topic gradually drifted to an unknown corner. Bai Yuxiu coughed lightly, constantly reminding himself that the purpose of coming this time was for his sister-in-law. He glanced at Qi Jingkai in private. The other person's expression was not at the extreme level of difficulty, and it seemed that there was still hope for improvement. "Bai Yuxiu, Xiao Yu, you'd better hand him over first, otherwise." He continued to say the next words, but everyone knew what would happen. As soon as his words came out, Ningfeng looked at him as if he had seen a ghost. Sick. That was not the tone when I talked to him just now. The guy who paid 2,500,000 to 80,000 yuan is now just looking at the dishes. Did you think he was dead? Ningfeng, hey. I said you. Bai Mu stretched out his hand to stop him, and said with a smile to Qi Jingkai and the others, "Third brother, please don't do anything. Weapons and everything are very expensive, and if you fight, you may make outsiders laugh." She pointed to a familiar building not far in front of the base and gestured, "The president's office is not far ahead. If we start a fight and alert his old man, we won't be able to eat and walk around." Hearing this, Lu Qinggran's eyes suddenly lit up and he agreed, "That's right, third brother, let's not alarm the president, right?" Qi Jingkai glanced at him indifferently, and he immediately shrank his neck, not daring to say anything anymore. "You can do it without taking action." Qi Jingkai looked at Bai Mu with no emotion in his eyes, "Hand him over." Bai Mu smiled bitterly, "Third brother, Hal Irene can't find anything in the Special Administration Bureau anyway, so why don't you?" "Not Hal Irene." Bai Mu choked, and his face was suddenly full of doubts. "Who is that?" "Except for Hal Aaron, they didn't anyone else from the first team?" Qi Jingkai's eyes darkened and he said coldly, "Where is Li Ju?" "Hand over Li Ju." Bai Mu. Ningfeng. The second team of people. Sorry, our ears may be blind, but who do you want us to hand over? End of this chapter. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. She always loves to sleep. Author, Guy and Faye. Chapter 605. Chapter 590 Losing Horses Collectively, 4. Baimwu, Ningfeng, and others thought for a moment that they were hallucinating. No, third brother, who did you say? Baimwu looked at him in disbelief. Bai Yuxiu immediately explained, it's my sister-in-law, Xiao. We saw on the Yun family's surveillance camera that people from your second team took my sister-in-law away. Baimwu. Ningfeng. The second team of people. You may have bad eyesight, but it was obviously her who took us away, not us who took her away. Baimwu felt a slight headache and tried to explain, third brother, this must be a misunderstanding. Listen to me and explain to you dash. Before she could finish speaking, Ningfeng took the lead and said, I'm warning you, don't slander people. When did we take her away? It's obviously her, Baimwu quickly covered his mouth with quick eyes and hands, her eyes wildly signaling, brat. They don't know the identity of the boss yet. If you reveal it casually, if the boss blames you, you will be dead. Ningfeng. I want to curse. They can't say anything, and they can't hit them. Will their anger be in vain? Qi Jinkai frowned, what did you say? It's nothing. Baimwu let go, wiped the saliva on Ningfeng's clothes, and asked with a smile, third brother, why are you so sure that the old, my sister-in-law was taken away by us? Where is it? Bai Yuxiu, after the incident at the Yun family, my sister-in-law went there and never came out again. During this period, except for us, only your second team went in and out. Ningfeng laughed, even if we have been to Yun's house, it is assumed that we took her away. Isn't your guess a bit hasty? And dash. His eyes swept across the group of people, and his tone was disdainful, I'm knocking on the door based on mere speculation. Your minds are even more sloppy. It's as if you have strong limbs and simple minds, ow. Ningfeng immediately screamed in pain, wailed and covered his head. He looked at Baimwu sadly and asked loudly, sister. What are you doing? What did you say? Baimwu's eyes were full of danger, who allowed you to speak in this tone? That's my brother, Ningfeng. He is not your biological brother, but I am your biological brother. Sister, do you treat your brother like this for this man? After hearing Ningfeng's name for Baimwu, his pupils trembled suddenly and he asked in disbelief, you, what did you just, call her? Ningfeng glared at him angrily, then thought of something, suddenly raised his lips and smiled, stepped forward and took Baimwu's arm affectionately, deliberately showing it off to him, of course I am calling you sister. He narrowed his eyes and smiled with a provocative expression, this is my sister. You bastard, get out of here. Bai Yuxiu's anger suddenly rose to his forehead, and he was so angry that his mind went blank. Where are you putting the pig's hooves? Loosen them. Lao Bai, calm down. Seeing that Bai Yuxiu was about to rush forward, Lu Qingran quickly stopped him. Calm down, Lu Qingran, take care of your people, otherwise I won't mind letting you two die for your love right away. You have already said that he is mine, and nothing will happen between them. That's not okay. Bai Yuxiu gritted his teeth, as long as you are a man, you are not allowed to touch Xiao. Otherwise, I will chop off his claws. Lu Qingran. Friend, you are a bit serious about being a girl. To make up for yesterday's. End of this chapter. She always loves to sleep. Author, Guy and Faye. Chapter 606. Chapter 591 Losing the Horse Collectively, 5. Baimweo was sandwiched between the two of them, with dark lines on his face. He broke away from Ningfeng's hand with a sullen face and said unbearably, "Have you two had enough trouble?" The two of them immediately shut up. Ningfeng stood aside obediently and put away his provocative expression. Bai Yuxiu also calmed down and lowered his head to straighten his clothes. Baimweo pinched his eyebrows with a headache and looked at Qi Jinkai helplessly. "Third brother, Lao, Li Ju is indeed here with us, but, things are not what you think." "What is that like?" "This." Baimweo hesitated and couldn't speak. Qi Jinkai's eyes deepened and he changed his tone. "Mu, I don't care why you took Jeju away. You must hand her over immediately. Otherwise, you know my temperament. I can't guarantee what will happen down there." Baimweo's eyes suddenly became strange, and she stared at him subtly for a long time, as if she finally gave in, and said, "That's it, I accept you." She breathed a long sigh of relief and chuckled. "Third brother, to tell you the truth, this person is not actually the one we want to bring back, but the order given by our boss." Qi Jinkai frowned. "9 gods?" "Yes." Bai Yuxiu and Lu Qinggran looked at each other with confusion on their faces. Lu Qinggran asked aloud, "Xiao, why did Zhu Shen take away my sister-in-law?" Baimwei rolled his eyes. "If you ask me, who should I ask?" She met Qi Jinkai's probing eyes again and said, "So, if you want someone, you shouldn't talk to us, but to our boss." As soon as these words came out, Ningfen next to him immediately understood what she was going to do. He chuckled in his heart and agreed, "Yes, yes, yes, if the 9 gods agree, then we will let him go immediately." "That's right. Right, that is it." The people behind him also followed suit. They all looked calm on the surface, but in their hearts they were smiling like Ningfen. Baimweo twitched the corner of his mouth and almost stopped tightening it. "These drama queens." Qi Jinkai pondered for a moment and asked, "Where are the 9 gods?" Ningfen tried his best not to laugh out loud, and said with a smile, "The president called her." "Just wait, I will send someone to call her back right away. Come here, hurry up and get the boss back to negotiate with God Q, hurry up." He turned around and shouted to a team member. His eyes were filled with a look of watching a show, and he winked and winked with the team member. His meaning was obvious. Hurry and go. Don't delay him from watching the show. The corner of the team member's mouth was stiff, and he was still trembling slightly when he observed carefully. It was obvious that he could no longer hold his nerve any longer. He replied with a stiff yes and turned around to leave. At this time, Li Ju, Zhongqing, and Mia were already rushing towards this direction. "Xiaju, damn girl, don't walk so fast." Zhongqing was panting heavily while holding onto the tree trunk on the side. He stretched out his hand to Li Ju, who was walking quickly in front of him, and said, "Why are you so anxious? Your subordinates are not vegetarians, not to mention Xiao Lu and Xiao Shi are not here either." Li Ju turned a deaf ear. Her steps did not slow down, and her expression was cold. "I know." Of course she knew nothing would happen to the base. She is going to settle accounts. The team is really good. If the tiger doesn't show off its power, then she is easy to deal with, right? Looking at Li Ju's expression, Mia helped Zhongqing stand up straight, clicked her tongue twice, and said to him, "President, I think God Q is going to die this time." Zhongqing, be more confident and remove the word fear of it. Mia, President, why are you not in a hurry? A war of the century is about to break out, yet he looks so calm? Zhongqing glanced at her lightly. "Otherwise, what else can we do? Now that things have come to this, Qi Jinkai will definitely not be able to escape that brat's beating. As his senior brother Xiaju's teacher, I can only stand aside and watch the show. Is it possible that you still want me to get involved with their kid, a matter of couple? But why do I always feel a bad premonition?" Mia looked at Li Ju's back, touched her chin and said this. They know the true identities of Li Ju and Qi Jinkai, but they have been hiding it from them. If they both fall off their horses later, they will realize what is going on sooner or later. Then can she and the president still have any good fruit to eat? Mia trembled all over, suppressed her terrible thoughts, and supported Zhong Qing to catch up slowly. Li Ju met the team member who came to see her halfway. She asked in a deep voice, "What's going on?" The man was stunned for a moment, and then blurted out, "A team came to the door. Team leader Ning and team leader Bai are confronting them. Let me come to you." Li Ju's face turned cold. "Let's go." Over there, the tense situation between the two sides has stabilized. Although they will not take action for the time being, the constant friction between the eyes in mid-air is extremely fierce. No one is convinced by the other, and the undercurrent is still raging. Suddenly, a lazy chuckle sounded. "Hey, what's going on? Are we getting together to have a party?" Qi Jinkai opened his closed eyes and looked at the person. The other party's eyes happened to glance over at this moment, and the two of them just looked at each other for a second, and then they were both stunned. Ji Yunchu was quite surprised. He took a look at the people around him and figured out the current situation based on the conversation in the team communication just now. He said, "It turns out that the third master is Q God. I have admired him for a long time." She raised her lips and smiled softly. Her eyes fell on Bai Yuxiu and Lu Qingran again. She couldn't help but paused and said, "This really surprises me." Qi Jinkai narrowed his eyes. "Drg really surprised me. I really didn't expect that today's trip would yield such a big harvest." These members of the second team were all acquaintances. No wonder the second team has been lurking in the imperial capital for so long and the Special Administrative Bureau didn't find a single clue. It would be strange to be able to guess the identity of the other party. Ji Yunchu smiled and said nothing. He walked to Bai Muyu and Ningfeng and asked in a low voice, "What is going on?" She was doing experiments in the laboratory just now and could hear the noise outside. Ningfeng snorted coldly and raised his voice deliberately. "God Q said that we captured his fiancée and asked us to hand over Li Ju." "Ji Yunchu? Ji Yunchu, who are you talking about?" Bai Muyu repeated expressionlessly, "Li Ju." Ningfeng thought it was not enough, so he added, "The third master wants to talk to Ju Shen. I have sent someone to find him." Hearing this, Ji Yunchu finally stopped and laughed out loud. "Ha ha 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 ha. Damn it, I'm laughing so hard. This is the confusing act of the century." Everyone on the opposite side was confused and had doubts on their faces. They didn't know what she was laughing at. Qi Jinkai frowned, feeling something was wrong. Everyone watched Ji Yunchu's laughter getting louder and louder, and finally bent down. She raised her hand to wipe the tears from the corners of her eyes, looked at Qi Jinkai, and suppressed her smile to give him advice. "Third master, I advise you, it's better to estimate the damage caused to us now, otherwise." She cleared her throat and smiled, "It might be too late later." End of this chapter.